light residential and pick up a little more commercial at the same time and keep everybody working together. Here's the existing door and hardware sites are on Main Street on this side, West Richards Road on this side, and then Market Street in the back. So we're looking at actually this entire parcel here, which includes door and hardware, as well as the building in the back where the pharmacy is, and this green area, this portion right here. So we're taking this whole area through that. And so what our goals are is actually to create more of a mixed use. So we want to get commercial space in there. We also want to pick up some residential apartments in there at the same time. So we want to get both of those, kind of create that activity. And the other goal we have is actually kind of bring the buildings out more toward the street. So we're getting actually, urban's probably the long term. We're getting more of the, we're seeing the buildings and the activity versus seeing the parking lot, and then we'll tuck like a central parking lot back behind them in the middle. We're going to keep the businesses up and running during the whole time, so we're doing this actually in a phased process. So I'll walk you through that, so just kind of how the phasing might work.
So I'm going to have a quick question, please. You guys are in the back, you're recording this for the television, is that correct? Is that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, if you are you picking up the sound at all? Do you need that for your audio feed? Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Thank you. The other one. Thank you.
Is that good then? Great.
That's perfect. Thank you.
So what we're looking at is on the site itself, we'll do it in 3 phases. The first phase, here's the existing door and hardware, the existing pharmacy toward the back, and this would be out facing toward Main Street on this portion. So what we're looking to do is actually then bring a first phase that would actually be a new commercial building out along the street itself, which would have approximately 13,000 square feet of commercial space on the first floor. And then also we'd have apartments on each level above, either 1 or 2 more levels of apartments above that. So we're picking up a mixed use, we're getting commercial space as well as residential above at the same time. This way we can keep the back end, the back parking lot, keep that running while we'll build this in the first portion. So that would be phase 1. So then phase 2, we'll pick up the frontage actually along West Richard Road in the bottom. So as this one is completed, then we'll come in with a second building, which right now is about 7,000 square feet of commercial space toward that, again, facing out toward the street itself. It does have the potential of the markets there that we could actually pick up a little more on the housing side, but right now we're just showing a commercial space on that area itself. Then the last phase would be, you'll see that actually door and hardware is here the whole time. Well, then the final phase would be to relocate door and hardware back in the corner here. So they're fronting then on West Richards and actually Market Square toward the back. So we can, this is their existing footprint, we can get them actually relocated down in that area at the same time. So what we're doing is actually kind of creating more of an urban feel, creating commercial buildings out toward the street, getting good frontage, good exposure on that, and then creating more of a unified parking lot in the back that actually be shared by all the commercial tenants as well as all the residential tenants itself. So we're getting kind of a mixed use within the area. I think we can do actually a very nice, I'll say, upgrade to that area, because we're looking at the renderings on the next one to get some very nice materials on that. Again, a lot of glass on the front. We want to get the exposure for the commercial spaces along the street, get that activity. And it's set up that it can be broken down into like small tenant spaces, or like 1,500 or 2,000, or it could handle bigger tenants also. So we've got that ability to move within that. And then the other one would be that we'll have apartments up above on that. So we're looking for that activity, that connection to the street itself, kind of get eyes on the street, get a nice little scale on that, get to like a 2 or 3 story building as we're coming down along Main Street itself to give a good, I'll say commercial, a good mixed use appeal to that area. And again, use a lot of good quality materials, a lot of brick on the building itself, a lot of glass materials, get exposure in that area. Keep that same image as we're coming around and actually extending on down toward the door and hardware on the other end. So I think we've got potential here for creating a win-win. It's like we're not displacing any businesses. We can keep all our businesses there that are in Oregon right now, work around that. At the same time, pick up some more additional commercial space for new businesses and actually add residential on there to get that mixed use. We found that actually, if we get the residential in, that actually kind of helps the businesses also, because then all of a sudden you have that built-in source of people who want to use the business in that area. So it actually kind of helps win-win both ways, gives a little help on both sides in that. So I think we've got a lot of potential there, but we've just gone through some really rough concepts here. We're trying to get a little feedback on if we look at that site, what the potential is in that. I think zoning-wise, I remember we're like a planned development site, I think is what the zoning is on that right now. So it seems like it kind of fits what we're trying to put together here.
Comments, anybody? Is there,
does you see coming in
go ahead.
to that lower level?
Well, I could speak to that a little bit. Right now, we talked to a possible fitness center that might come in. They're looking at about 5,000 square feet. Otherwise, it'd be small local, we're looking at smaller local businesses, office, beauty salons, stuff like that, chiropractor, dentist. You know, just really just about anything, because we can vary the square footage pretty good. I mean, you can go down to around 1,000 square feet. You can go up from there. I mean, the space we built, so it's pretty modular. You can add walls as you see fit, plumbing, things like that. So, you know, we're going to keep it so you can have as much variety as you can in there, without having to really to change the footprint much. So, and then residential above, combination of probably 1 and 2 apartments. We've discussed possibly condoing them, so in the future they could be condominiums. You could sell them down the road. You wouldn't have to, but the condos would be on, condo docs would be on them. So as a result, you know, the finishes in there will be more on the upper end. You know, it's gonna be nice. It's gonna be nice construction. So, yeah.
Do you have any kind of rough timeline you're looking at for this project?
Well, it's going to be phased in. You know, phase 1 we'd like to start yet this summer and get it,
Okay.
you know, get it done before winter. After that, it's going to kind of depend on how things get filled up and stuff. But we anticipate probably moving all 3 phases a couple of years, probably something like that. Yeah. There seems to be a demand, especially for residential. I mean, right now the vacancy rate in Dane County is 2%, which is basically one group moving out and the next group moving in. So there's a need for that, and so that's, I think the mixed use concept is probably one of the highest and best uses for this piece. So
Mike, you got any comments about it?
I do. You mentioned that you wanted the businesses to face out onto Main Street. And Richards, and yet on the site plan, the one that you've got right there, I don't see anything that shows doors on the Main Street or the Richards side. Could you explain what you're thinking about there?
Well, actually, there will be frontage, I think if you see it.
So there will be actually frontage along those that come into the sidewalks of that area. To be quite honest, we're at this initial stage. We just haven't picked up all the sidewalks and all the access points. Our thought is that we want to have, again, 4-sided building. So all 4 sides are actually treated the same. There's not really a rear to this building or whatever. So depending on what the tenant is and what their uses are, we want to actually have access actually on both sides. Because we do understand, even though we're facing out to the street, a lot of people are still coming by car. So we need to actually have both of those access from both sides coming into those spaces. But we do want the image along the street that we have that flexibility to do that.
So, as, for example, phase 1 would evolve and your tenant mix became known, you would have let's say, an 8-foot wide sidewalk running from the sidewalk along the street to the front of the building where that doorway was. And you're just not showing it on the site plan now because you don't know where it'll be.
Right.
Thank you.
So each one of these potential storefronts along the street itself, they'll also have access points out to the street.
Well, I think the second thought that I have is on the north side of town, we're built out. You know, there are some redevelopment sites, but there's really no vacant property with just a couple little exceptions. And yet the population of the village is growing about 2,500 people a decade, you know, 250 people a year. And so this is how we grow. We're boxed into the north by the city limits of Fitchburg. We can't grow that way. And the way we expand our business base is through redevelopment and infill and generally going up. We allow for the potential of mixed commercial and residential and office uses in the North Main Street area. I think that from an architecture standpoint, the concepts that are shown here are generally consistent with other new architecture we've had in North Main Street. I like the idea of, particularly for a mixed-use development and a multi-building development, having a central parking lot that really helps the buildings share parking with one another. The overall supply of parking is something I'll need to review more carefully. Our ordinance automatically allows you to provide 25% less parking than would normally be required on a single-use building if you're mixing residential and commercial uses. So I would be reviewing this concept, assuming all of the commercial and office uses were going full blast. Is there enough parking during the day? And then when we have a mix of commercial and office and residential uses on a Saturday, do we have enough on-site parking for those uses? I know we're in the ballpark, I just haven't had a chance to do the math. I think that based on the site plan you're provided, there's likely a little bit more impervious surface than we have right now because we've got that one area that's green space on the site, and so we'll need to review it from a stormwater standpoint. I'm curious as to what the commission feels about this. It's different.
Jerry, you've got, in the final build-out, there's a small area for the outdoor sales. I know that right now there's a considerable amount of outdoor sales that Dorn has and takes care of. And I know that it's preliminary, but it's something that we should be aware of as the project comes forth and continues through the process. Just make sure that there's going to be enough there to be adequately taken care of their concerns and needs. There's a considerable grade change on this site from North Main to even like the entry of the existing Dorn building, probably about 4 or 5 feet-ish. And again, these are just conceptual, I get it. But it seems like there's gonna have to be a compromise someplace along the line. Either the entries are gonna have to be at grade on North Main, or they're gonna have to be at the grade of the parking lot, which is gonna be something lower. So you're gonna have to accommodate entries, if we're talking about entries off of North Main into those commercial spaces, something's gonna have to be done with that. Or if we're gonna be talking about a grade change on the other side, something's gonna have to be incorporated with those. Generally, the architecture is nice. I'd like to see it somehow relate a little bit more to a very important intersection in my mind of the city. That you've got a tower, but I'd like to see something tie it out a little bit more in the architecture and the landscaping or something like that, tie it a little bit better. On the long-term or the final phase build-out site plan, there's a angled drive on the north side that I think would be nice if the parking stalls that are adjacent to that drive aisle were parallel with it or perpendicular to it to create a little bit more of a green space in the middle for some possible infiltration, or a little bit more green space or something like that. Generally, I think that it's a nice redevelopment. I think that it's something that would be really welcome and could be a nice sort of springboard for this side of town, and I'm happy to see it. There's a little building at the corner. Do we know what that is, or?
Yes. Yes, we do know what that is.
It's a lift station.
I didn't ask that.
That's actually, we've actually talked to them about that. That is a sewage lift station. I believe we call it station number 2. It is a submersible pump station right now. So it's actually a dry pit submersible pump station. And we've talked to them about, we would request, since they're going to be in that area and they probably don't want that brick building there, to possibly reserve for the village space for our electrical and mechanical equipment that we would have out there. Really, it's just electrical and controls that would be out there. But we've talked to them about that. We'd still have the station there. It's just all you would see would be probably a decorative slab.
Okay. The only other thing that I would say is, picking up kind of on what Mike had started, I agree that, let's face it, we're still a driving community. Most of the traffic that's going to happen here is going to be from the parking lot, but it would be nice to somehow enliven the street side with some lighting, with some patios, with some outdoor eating areas, with some landscaping, those types of things.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I think it would really make an improvement in that part of town. It really would make a nice entrance into our village. So I like what you guys have done. Okay. I don't see anybody objecting, so,
Okay.
all right, proceed. Thank you. Thank you.
Get my tool belt out.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is item 4B, discussion possible recommendation, Village Board amending the revised 2012 SIP for Lot 1 of Oregon Parks neighborhood. There's also a memo from Mr. Slavny regarding that development.
Kilwadopoulos, the developer. Sorry.
So it's fine.
Where were you guys waiting for?
No, we're ready for you. We're ready for you.
I think you saw in the packet relatively minor changes that came up as we've been completing or going through and starting up on the final phase of the townhomes there. Main change is the removal of those trees between the garages, frankly, between the tenants and the snowplows. I think those things get hit enough and get in the way enough that we just thought they were impractical, particularly since they're internal to the development as opposed to sort of visible to everyone else. So we figure with all the landscaping that we have on the exterior of the buildings and the green space inside, we just thought it was a little more practical to keep our trees slightly more protected. And then if you have any questions about the other items, switch to a more residential style of light fixture rather than the commercial style that was originally proposed. And then there was a vague allusion to signage, which we don't have and haven't needed any, so we just pulled that section.
Okay. Has everybody had a chance to read Mr. Slavny's memo? Dated the 27th. Page 2, there's a couple items on there with recommendations. Mike, did you want to say anything about it?
I'd sure like to see those landscape peninsulas saved. I understand the trade-off. Maybe small trees would be better than shrubs in that area. And staff wanted to make sure that the amenities that have long been proposed for that central triangular area get installed, essentially parallel with this last building, just to make sure they aren't delayed any longer. So those were the two suggestions that I have.
And then in relation to that, we had talked about, or I'd heard at some point from staff possibly dealing with a letter of credit. Our only concern with trying to develop that interior green space in parallel is it gets ruined during construction. So if there's concern about getting it done, we'd be happy to, provide a letter of credit just so that the village doesn't have to worry about it getting included at the end of the construction of the two buildings, which we're just starting on now, those final two buildings.
So typically for these kinds of improvements or the landscaping that's required or decorative lighting, we allow a full year from the occupancy of the last building because, some trees only do good when you plant them in the fall, for example. And so in my memo, I suggested we allow a 12-month time frame from occupancy of the last building before those improvements need to be made.
Yeah, that's fine. That certainly shouldn't be a problem at all, because by the time we have occupancy, basically that interior area gets cleared out. You know, the temporary electrical and all those things are out. Supplies are gone, so that we can actually do the landscaping properly. On those little garage islands, we did have, initially we had shrubs and then tried with smaller trees, all of which ended up not succeeding. So I would, if there's any other way we can, I mean, I'd be happy to, it's not really a matter of cost, it's just practicality. If there's any other place that we could put trees, I'd be happy to add them somewhere.
Keo, are the peninsulas there?
The peninsulas are,
I don't believe, I was back there, I think it's just paved,
It's
pretty much
right now it's-
continuous across.
right,
all
it
of-
was gravel before and now it's mostly paved, so
Right.
it's really the air conditioning units, it's right where those air conditioning units are.
I guess our concern, well, I know one of the part of the SIP dealt with the fact that each unit had 2 parking spaces in the garage and 2 directly outside for guests or overflow parking. And that was, you know, kind of clearly shown on the original SIP. And those peninsulas actually provide some nice delineation between those garages. I think it also helps break up some of that back there because it's such a wide open, flat area. But when I was back there, I did not see where they had been there before.
They were, basically the gravel got covered over, portions of the gravel got covered over, so that's, and that was again in response to the tenants.
Right.
Those driveways do get used frequently, so we were actually thinking that it might be better to do striping there or something like that, because I think that's why the trees were getting hit. It's not just people coming into and out of their garages, but the garages, you know, like a lot of people, the garages end up getting filled with things other than cars, and so people tend to park out there. And when we had the time that we put the trees there, which was the last set of planting that we tried in those areas, those would basically get hit by the tenants as they were getting in and out of their cars, or guests. Anyway, that was the logic behind that.
Some of the questions that have arisen from this kind of fall out from the seeking a building permit for Phase 3, Buildings 5 and 6, and I just took a look back to see what we, you know, if everything was in order, and we had also received a complaint from a resident about the landscaping not being completed on Phase 2. So I did go out and look at it, and Keo admits that they haven't done the landscaping in Phase 2. My question to him is why isn't the landscaping done on, you know, completed on those portions before you're doing Phase 3? And I think it's just good policy to be able to do that as you go along and to finish your projects and before you start the third project. So that's really where our recommendations. I think the landscaping is important. I think finishing the center area with the gazebo and the picnic tables and the barbecue grill and everything actually make for a very, very nice area in there. It's private, it's not public, obviously, but we think that those are very, very important parts of this development and will help the neighborhood overall, too.
Anybody else have any comments about this? I looked at this a little bit and came up with some ideas from what Mike has stated here. So,
The traffic circle that we're talking about, is that a public road, or is that, okay?
No,
that was
it's private.
That's
my
just
misunderstanding.
the driveway around the triangle portion of the center.
Yeah, it's all private.
Yeah, it sounds like staff and Mr. Slapney all prefer that the plantings remain, proposed ones. Specifically in item 1, he says, request to eliminate the landscape peninsulas between the garage should not be granted. And I think that's what I've heard from staff and what Mike has stated in his notes. Understanding that, again, we have construction going on and we do want to have some of the stuff done. We could further go on in item number 2, where we could strike, maybe let's say, rather than all landscaping peninsulas, et cetera, shall we start with request to eliminate the landscape peninsulas between garages should not be granted. All unfinished improvements to all the central open space future, including the gazebo and landscaping, shall be fully completed within 12 months of the initial residence occupancy permit for the next building, which you've agreed to. beyond that, we can also state all landscaping for phases 1 and 2, which apparently there's been some complaints about, be completed by August 1st of 2016, which is not necessarily unreasonable because those units have been completed. Is that something that, you know, you guys would be in agreement with? Do you feel that's reasonable to maintain our status that we want to have the landscape peninsulas?
I don't, where they're located, you'd be hard pressed to see whether they're there or not from any of the public sidewalks or public roads around the site.
Yeah.
It's totally enclosed by 2-story buildings. It's an interior amenity that, you know, someone could review from the inside, but I don't see that it's, from a public standpoint, that anybody's gonna know if they're there or not there.
However-
You know, between driveways on duplexes, we've oftentimes tried to leave that 4 feet in the middle there, and to try to get anything to ever grow in those is nearly impossible. Grass doesn't do well there, because cars drive over the edge of it. You put gravel in there, and then it just ends up going through the snow blower or whatnot. We've had difficulty over the years, you know, doing anything on duplexes anymore. We typically pave over that 4 feet, just because it's not a quality planting area where anything thrives. And being that these are not visible from the public right of way, you know, I don't have an issue with it.
Okay. Does it have anything to do with our requirements for plantings and developments, since this is not a business as such?
Yes, there are requirements for all multifamily housing, and in its original configuration, the project complied with our requirements. So I think that if we wanted to stick with those point values, the quantity of landscaping overall, we need to find a different location on the site to essentially relocate those required plants somewhere else. And you mentioned that in your presentation.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to do that.
So you're saying, Mike, you wouldn't necessarily have a disagreement if we were able to get the same number of plantings on the facility or on that property?
Well, I think that's something that should be required regardless.
Right.
I personally would prefer to see the landscaping where originally approved, but I understand the practical difficulties that you're discussing.
Anybody else have some comments?
I understand it's the easy answer to just pave it over. But I also think about, as far as a presentation of the building itself, how it looks. Not just for people that live there and invest in it or want to live there, but visitors that come and park on the backside and those types of things. I think that there's other plants out there that are hardy. Prairie grasses don't need maintenance. Swamp oaks can live in a salty environment, for instance. Even a railing, something. But I also like what Jeff had said about that delineation factor. There's something nice about that. Because I know that it can very easily escalate to, well, I got a pickup truck and a boat, and then all of a sudden now I'm parking onto the neighbor's land. And you know what, it's just, it's an easy thing to delineate and without too much difficulty. So, understanding that it's easy to maintain and to pave over, I still think that a little more effort should be put forth in putting the islands.
Okay.
I like the possibility of replacing that number of trees, possibly even in the outer terrace between the sidewalk and the street, around the perimeter of the property. There's a lot of area there that could benefit from street trees.
Okay, so we've got 2 guys, the rest of us might as well talk about, okay, so we know where we're going with this. Eric, you wanna step in on it?
For me, I would put the plantings on the outside, but I like the idea of some delineation between more than pavement and striping. I think if there's another way, if it's some kind of planter type, it's obviously at a cost, but it's provide something to, this is your space.
Just one comment to throw in. The item that's always there between the spaces right now and will continue to be there are those air conditioning condenser units. So there is actually something between the spaces. It's not totally pavement all the way across.
So I'm just wondering if something like a paver block in there, you know, to take that asphalt out and use another flat material that isn't as subject to disruption as gravel might be another alternative there.
Paper block or even concrete?
Yeah.
Can we do all those kind of things with this? You know, now that we've got this request, we can modify it.
You can modify it, sure.
Okay, all right. Mark? No comment?
No comment.
Okay. It sounds as though there's some feelings that maybe we can forego possibly the plantings. However, they still want some kind of delineation between properties besides a condensing unit. Could we agree upon, and again, the applicant has to go there, agree upon something like, and the reason I'm saying concrete is because pavers, to me, will eventually get disrupted in some way. And striping it and painting is not, in my mind, sufficient. Is that something we could agree upon?
Are you thinking like a colored stamped concrete type of?
Well, that is expensive.
No, I know, but I would think that'd be more expensive.
If they'd like to go that route,
plantings,
that'd be
but-
wonderful, yeah. But at a very minimum, at least the concrete will certainly, and if they want to add that amenity where you have stamp, that would certainly upgrade the
It'd look a little
appearance.
nicer, yeah.
It would look much nicer, yes. It's a suggestion.
We could definitely look at something, come up with some ideas, and
That'd be great. So why don't we, you want to go down that road that way? Okay, so let me try to do this then. We're still going to insist upon the, finishing the other requirements, at particular times. So it would be a recommend the village board approval. Let's see, amending the SIP for Lot 1 Oregon's Park neighborhood with the following stipulations: that all unfinished improvements to all the central open space features, including the gazebo and landscaping, be fully completed within 12 months of the initial residential occupancy permit for the next building. All landscaping for Phase 1 and 2 be completed by August 1st, 2016. And that in lieu of the landscape peninsulas, that a concrete amenity be installed to show delineation between properties or apartments.
Could I suggest you use decorative concrete? I think that would
Fine.
convey
And
positive.
I see people, okay, so I will change that. So that would be changed then to decorative. So would somebody like to make that motion?
I can make that motion.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second, Mr. Sears. Yep. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Moving on to item 4C, General Development Plan for the Sanctuary Project 249 and 267 North Main Street. Previously, we had a public hearing, which we adjourned till this meeting, so at this time, we'll reopen that public hearing. Like to do, I think, is, Mike, you want to, or maybe, let's see, maybe we'll have you guys give us an update on where you're at. And after that, I would like to ask Mr. Slavny to make his comments, and then we'll proceed after that, okay?
Again, I'm Tim Trimble with SCA Properties LaSalle. We're the developer of the site. And again, appreciate the opportunity to come before the commissioners. At our previous hearing, there was a number of concerns raised. After that, went back and met with our architectural team and our group, and I think we've got some improvements that we wanted to show folks and kind of go through some of those issues, and I think we've made strides to come back with a better product. These are in no particular order, but the first was a lot of concerns about the height of the building. It's 3-story with a pitched roof on the one side, 4-story pitched roof as the site falls down. We are proposing that we would convert that to a flat roof, 4-story building, which in effect would reduce the height somewhere between 12 to 15 feet. I do have a drawing here I'll put up to show you.
Well, when you say that, be flat roof on a 3-story area, and then a 4th area be also flat?
Yes.
Okay.
The commissioners can still see that. So before, we had a building that looked like this with a pitched roof. And now, after the last meeting, we can change that to a flat roof, which, and I said, in effect reduces the height somewhere 12 to 15 feet across the 3 and 4-story section both. One of the other issues, or two of the other issues that came up too, were regarding to traffic and parking. And there was concerns about traffic coming onto Main Street with school and those kind of things, as well as do we have enough parking on site. We still believe that the parking we have at 42 stalls is sufficient for the use. And again, as I mentioned at the last meeting, staff will be coming at varying times during the day and leaving at varying times during the day, so there's not a rush in and a rush out, if you will. But somebody had raised the question at the last meeting about the entrance coming off Main being an enter and an exit, right in, right out both. So our thought is to propose we would change that to an entrance only, and they would come in there and exit out onto Johnson. And if we do that, and I'll put the site plan up in a moment, that would eliminate the turnaround, and we could then add another 7 or 8 parking stalls to get it up to about 50 stalls. Now, let me show you what I was describing there. So currently, you could come in, drop off, turn around, come back out, and take a right turn onto Main Street. If we make this an entrance only, you come in, come around, exit to Johnson, and then come back onto Main Street down at Johnson, which is a controlled corner. Doing that means we don't need this turnaround area here, so I could bring my parking across. I said add another 7 or 8 stalls, so now I'm at 49, 50 parking stalls. The one property owner to the north is affected obviously by our driveway for the deliveries. Again, there's not going to be a lot of deliveries. It'd be the food truck, linens, those kind of things. Postal service, more likely those guys usually come to the front door. So we don't anticipate a lot of traffic there. There will be, at that property owner, about a 3-foot retaining wall, and then we had proposed a fence on top of that to shield headlights. Our understanding is the property owner would prefer to have landscaping there. We're actually happy to do either or some combination of both, to help improve that situation. There was also a comment from some folks about this building is going to decrease property values of the homes around it, which I found a little bit interesting, because typically when we build a project like this, our construction costs are going to be over $100,000 a unit, just construction alone, not including any architectural or financing fees or any of that. So a lot of times people are usually worried that that's going to mean values go up and taxes go up. So usually we're seen as an improvement to the neighboring values, not necessarily a detriment to that. The other is kind of the obvious. The site has an abandoned church building that's been there for 10 plus years. I've heard that there's fire trucks have been called out and there's been hazards and things like that. So once again, we view it as we're making an improvement to the neighborhood, not necessarily a detriment. The one comment that came out after the meeting was some concerns about the units we've selected for the heating and cooling in the building itself. We have an individual unit for every resident, so they can control their own heat, their own cooling. They sit typically below the window. The grills can be matched to the exterior siding color. I think I sent some information on that showed examples of that. It's a widely accepted product that's used in senior housing, multifamily housing, hotels. So looks and things like that have been widely accepted for a number of years. There was a concern about the noise that came from those. I talked to our architects, I talked to our contractor, I spoke to a heating and cooling contractor, even reached out to a manager of the facility that I provided a picture of, and none of those have ever had any incidents or issues or concerns from anybody about noise. So that's just never really proven to be an issue. The other thing is that the neighboring property owners are, the closest one I think is 50 some feet from the building. So at 50 plus feet, I don't know that you're going to hear anything from the operation anyways. So we don't feel that that issue warrants changing our design or our concept. And again, it actually provides the resident with a better product because they can control their own heating and cooling in their units. I guess the final point I would make, and then I have Dean here from our KD Engineering to answer any questions regarding the ponding and how we created that and sized it and those kind of things. There was a project that had been proposed on this site. It had a PD zoning, as I understand it. And when I went back and started to compare our project to the one that was previously here, to my understanding had been approved and ready to go, and then the economy prevented that from happening, and the zoning relapsed back to institutional zoning. They were proposing 96 units, we're 106. We actually have more parking than they proposed. We actually have a smaller building in square footage. We have a smaller first floor plan in square footage. And our building actually is further away from the neighbors' houses than the previous project, again, that was, my understanding, had been approved. So I kind of looked down that list and I say to myself, there was a project that was ready to go at one point in time that didn't. We're offering a project that in a number of ways is better, I think, for the neighborhood for the reason I just stated. So that's why we believe, moving forward is the right thing to do. I guess with that, I'll kind of wrap up my comments. Again, I have Dean Hefner from KD Engineering, if anybody had any questions on the pond sizing, or actually the landowners here as well, if anybody had questions about the prior project that I spoke of.
Dean, have you gone through and done any preliminary work at this point, or maybe final work as far as the sizing of the pond?
Yes, we sized the pond and we checked everything for drainage, and we submitted to Dane County for review.
So if we're going to meet all requirements. Jeff, did you have a chance to look at any of that? Probably not.
Have not. The only thing I had questioned, the last meeting you mentioned the pond was 12 feet deep. I can't imagine the pond being that deep.
I think it was 10 feet.
Yeah, during 100-year storms, it's 10 feet, but it's only designed to be about 4 or 5 feet deep.
Okay, so you're looking at the 100-year storm.
That makes more sense.
The one comment I would add on the pond is when we sized the pond, we didn't design it just strictly to accommodate the runoff created by the impervious surfaces from our building, in other words, the rooftop and the parking. We actually oversized it to help correct some of the conditions that are existing now. The neighbors have shared with me pictures of, standing water and those kind of things. So this pond actually helps improve that situation in a number of ways. So, again, we feel like we've kind of reached out to do the best we can.
Would it be ponding that occurred on this property or ponding on the adjacent properties that you're referring to?
Yeah, it should actually help both, my understanding.
That's what
Yeah, we're lowering the road so the water drains off of the people.
all right.
Yeah.
So it'll come from the adjacent properties.
Yep.
Okay, fine,
Yep.
thank you, thank you. I asked staff to, this purple thing, this is item 4C. That is copies of the previous plan that was submitted and that we reviewed back in May of 2008 and in August of 2008. We went through public hearings at the time. We went through GDP and SIP at the time. And this particular packet, as you look through, is similar to what they're providing, because I think this was provided to you gentlemen when you first started looking at this property, as far as some sort of a guideline of what was looked at previously, right? Okay. So it's just for your reference to take a look at, to what was originally proposed and actually approved on this property. Okay, Mike.
There's a few extra copies of that.
There's some extra
on
copies,
the
I guess.
table.
Oh, they've been circulating already.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Slavny, it looks like they addressed most of your comments here on your memo, or your email, I should say, of May 11th. You want any additional comments?
Correct. I had put together a list of issues that were identified at the public hearing and at subsequent staff discussions. And the issues that we raised were height and apparent height, particularly compared to the existing residential structures in the neighborhood, the AC heating units versus central service, the provision of parking spaces, and we hadn't discussed the concept of one-way and eliminating the turnaround and providing more visitor spaces. So that's something that staff hadn't talked about and wasn't talked about at the last version of the public hearing. And whether or not a flat roof or a pitched versus the pitched roof would have a difference. So this is a continuation of the public hearing.
Yes.
And I want to back up a little bit and just remind the commission and the public that the general development plan is the zoning step. So we see a detailed concept for the project, but it isn't the final project. If the general development plan is approved, then the right to do what we approve is vested with the property, and it's vested for 5 years, just like the previous project. But the applicant has to come back with the final details, building materials, colors, final building design, lighting, landscaping, hours for pickup and delivery at the site. And, you know, we're not at that step tonight. But if the general development plan is approved, the right to do whatever we approve is there, and it's vested, and it's for 5 years. So if the commission or later the village board has significant concerns remaining, my advice would be either not take action yet or deny the general development plan, because we can't approve the general development plan and erase that approval at the next step, the implementation plan. If the commission is opposed to this project and wants to make a recommendation against this project to the village board, now's the time to do it, not at the next step. It's too late by that time.
Okay. Thank you.
I did also, I think somebody had asked about, could you show us views of the building from Main Street as well as from Johnson? And I handed a small drawing, but I do have a board of that I can put up, so it gives you a little bit of an idea of what that looks like.
Thank you for doing that, Tim.
So what our architect did here is put in housing similar in size and structure. It's not the exact house per se, and existing trees, as well as the trees that we were proposing to put in, to give an idea of how does the building look in relation to the housing and the trees and the landscaping is there. And I think especially with the flat roof here, I think this shows that, you know, we blend in quite well.
No. Thank you. Any questions at this point for the plan commission, the applicant? We We also have a memo from our fire chief. You can read it. Chief, I don't know if you want to say anything at this point.
Talk a little bit. I guess first of all, my name's Jack Miller.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jack, would you grab the microphone because the TV?
My name's Jack Miller. I'm fire chief for Oregon area. I started here in June of last year. And I've been reading some things in the paper and hearing some things in the public, which haven't been stated by the fire department. So I wanted to come tonight. My memo is pretty generic, but I wanted to come and just kind of address some of those concerns, and so you heard it from my mouth first. And as a fire chief, as a fire department, we continually assess what's happening in a village. We do something called a community risk assessment, and as these things continue to happen, it becomes part of our strategic plan. And then as we move forward, we ask for a certain percentage each year to allocate for those types of buildings or plans or whatever that may be. And so far, since June, the biggest concern that we had seen was traffic accidents. So we went to the board and said we needed more equipment, we needed the things that would make us the best at providing that service. And the board and the commissioner were behind us 100%. So we got that equipment. These types of buildings, these types of things, we have one on Wolf Street that would be comparable to this, not exactly the same, but comparable. We have pre-plans, and we make plans when these types of things, pre-plans are things that we decide ahead of time. So when in the event of emergency, our guys know what to do. We train on it. We do things weekly, daily to make sure that we're ready for that. As these buildings progress, we understand that there's a need for more equipment that specialize in these types of buildings. Right now, with there only being one, it wasn't on our radar. But as we move forward, obviously there's some concerns, as it's stated in the paper in one article, of a ladder truck. And a ladder truck doesn't solve everything, although it's a great piece of equipment. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have one. But reality is that's a $750,000 to $800,000 piece of equipment. And you have to make sure that I can when I go in front of the board, that I can justify that. And right now, with Fitchburg and Stoughton and some other areas close, with the amount of buildings that we have, the reality is that they're here and they can help us, but we're also concerned that, if they have an emergency or something else is happening, then what? So that's where the pre-plan comes in, to make sure, in a fully sprinklered building, smoke is our number one concern. Life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation in that order are what we live by. And we make sure that we're able to get those people out. We also try to talk with the people, the builders, and make sure that the people with some disabilities are maybe not able to move as well as others, if they can accommodate us and move them to the first or second floor. And usually we've been able to work with people and, they understand that demand. So I don't want anybody to think that we haven't thought about this, and I don't want that to be the reason that that would stop something. Because we still provide a service to the District of Oregon, and we're going to do that regardless of 5-, 6-story buildings, whatever it may be. And I have no reason to believe in the year that I've been here that the joint board, the commission, the village, and all of the other entities that are involved aren't going to support us in that. But it has to be justified. And as these things happen, as we continue to grow, that justification begins to exist.
Thank you,
Sorry,
sir.
I kind of turned my back.
No, that's fine. You need it. That's great.
But if there's any other questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer them.
Appreciate you.
Chief, I have a question for you. You've looked at the proposed site plan.
Yeah, I was involved early on. Jeff had called me over, and we'd worked with the developer. There was some concerns I had with access to fire department connections, the number of hydrants that were there, and they were more than willing to help us out with that to make sure that they were accessible.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. One more item, the applicant did, and it's just information for you, did add a document that we want to review possibly. It's just an article. So, any other questions at this point of the applicant? Okay, then we will, thank you very much, Chief. Okay, then we will open it up to the public input. We're going to ask you that only new stuff, please. We'd rather not listen to the same thing we listened to last time, and I'm sure you can appreciate that. So anybody like to come forward, state your name, and we'll have to listen to what you have to say.
Hi, I know I spoke at the last one, but I do want to express the fact
Your
that...
name, please.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
name.
Laura Gotchberg. I'm adjacent to the property on the south side, the sanctuary, proposed sanctuary project. I have, since that time, talked to all of the neighbors, with the exception of maybe one or two in the immediately surrounding areas, as well as other people in the community. A lot of people were unaware of quite the size and the scale of the proposal of this project. and showed them the 10-page proposal, the maps, listed some concerns we had, and had put together just a very basic petition, just asking for more information, that we have some concerns and we would like them addressed before things went further, that we would be opposed to the project at this time. As of this time, there's over 90 signatures on there, so it's not a small group of people. I would say probably 50 or more immediately surround the proposal. And Tim did a nice job of trying to tweak some of these things and making some adjustments. But honestly, the flat roof doesn't change the fact that it's 106 units. It doesn't change the fact that it's still gonna block out all of the sun. I don't know if anyone here has actually walked the property. It's kind of life-changing to go back there with the map, look at everybody's properties and see where things are gonna be, look up at the trees that are 50-plus feet high, and imagine a building there. There are people in my neighborhood who are really smart people who have done some research they'd like to present tonight about things we're concerned about, so I don't want to speak too long. I would like to offer you the petitions to have in your possession. Who would, I'll get those in just a second. And I would like to turn this over to the rest of the community to voice the concerns, and we'll try not to be repetitive. I know a lot of people have quite grave concerns, and property value is only minimal. What we haven't heard at all from anyone is, why is this a viable project? Why do we need 106 residential units when there's not a single existing residential structure in this county that is that large? Why do we need that in the middle of a residential block in Oregon, Wisconsin with under 10,000 people? And where are those people going to come from? And if this project needs 106 units in order to be viable, in order to be financially successful, I think our biggest fear is, what if it doesn't fill? What are we left with? Yeah, we have an abandoned church now. That's nothing compared to the size and scope of what we could possibly be facing if this isn't viable. And I haven't seen any evidence or statistics or anything of why we need this. And there will be someone speaking about those concerns as well. So the size and the scope of this is just immense for where we live. It changes the very fabric of our community. We love Oregon. We love our homes. We've tried to improve them. Many of us live in homes that have been here longer than most of us alive in this room. We've put a lot of time and effort into them. We support the downtown businesses. We want this community to be successful, but we don't see how this is going to improve anybody's lives in the community. And I'm going to just turn it over to everybody else who has something to say.
I'm going to pass that around. I don't think I have enough for everybody. But I'd like to thank the commission for allowing me to speak.
You're going to have to give them their name, John.
And I'm going to do that. John Tempte, I'm a resident of Oregon, and in relationship to this project, I just want to give a little bit of background. I'm a professor of family medicine at the University of Wisconsin, a professor actually of family medicine and community health. I'm a researcher. I'm a family physician. If I'm a little bit tired, I was up most of the night putting elderly people in the hospital. So I'm going on about 3 hours of sleep right now. My practice right now is primarily elderly individuals. A couple of things. I'm a former long-term care facility director, and I'm also the medical director of Madison-Dane Public Health. But I want to speak primarily on the needs and capacity here in Wisconsin. For background, across the United States, about 1.8 million people live in nursing homes, and about 900,000 live in assisted living facilities. If we look at that, that's about 5.6 people per thousand live in long-term care nursing homes, and about 2.8 nationally live in assisted living. Currently, in Wisconsin, we have almost 400 nursing homes. We have 1,547 assisted living facilities. Currently, our capacity in Wisconsin, we exceed the national capacity for long-term care beds, and we exceed the national average for assisted living, almost by twofold. Economic impact of assisted living. Companies like building these because they see these as cash cows. There's a lot of money to be made in putting them in, but there's not a whole lot of money to sustain them. We talk about the type of people they're going to be hiring. Caregivers, average salary across the country, $10 per hour. A certified nurse assistant, $13.75 per hour. I hire right now for my research a former assisted living who lasted 3 months. She could not stand it because of the stresses, the turnover, and so on. The turnover rates in assisted living are extremely high. People last a few months. Every year, 25% of people turn over. And because of the need for investment return, the one thing you can squeeze in long-term or in assisted living is the personnel. And what happened, this is a quote, understanding that labor typically comprises 50% or more of operating expenses, tighter staffing, less training, and low wages are the inevitable outcomes. So I just want you to realize what we're looking at. If we look at Wisconsin right now for long-term or for assisted living beds, Wisconsin is basically double the national rate again. The average size of an assisted living, and this is all data that's provided by the state, is 18.6 beds. The range in beds go anywhere from 5 across these almost 1,600 to 150 beds. But in the entire state of Wisconsin, there are 10 facilities that are 100 beds or greater in the entire state of Wisconsin. So the other thing I just have to toss out is there is very good data out there that's showing the large for-profit assisted living and long-term care facilities have low quality of care. This has been shown over and over again. Why do I know this? I have a large grant pending doing work in nursing homes. So this is all fairly current. I just wanted to take a look at a graphic I put together. This is on page 3 toward the bottom that show the sizes of Wisconsin's assisted living facilities. If you look at the proposed sanctuary, you find that this is an extreme outlier. It is extremely large compared to all the assisted living in Wisconsin. If we look just in Dane County, right now there are 107 assisted living facilities in Wisconsin. The average size is 22.7 beds. The range is from 5 to 81 beds. Most of the large ones, actually the 5 largest, all between 60 and 81 beds are in Madison, okay? And so a graphic at the bottom of page 4 shows you the frequency histogram or the distribution of assisted living in Dane County. When we start looking at Oregon's peer communities, so what are the peer communities of Oregon and Dane County? There are DeForest, McFarland, Mount Horeb, Stoughton, Verona, and Waunakee. There are 29 assisted living facilities in these communities. Average size is 19 beds. The range goes from 8 to 50 beds. So the size of this, actually, if you look in statistical terms, places it 7.5 standard deviations off the mean. This is incredibly, incredibly huge. There's no precedent for this. If you take a look at the graphic at the bottom of page 5, it shows you the distribution. This is incomparable in any of our peer communities. Why is that? Because it's not sustainable. So is this going to be sustainable in Oregon? Well, let me just tell you where we are right now. We have 64 assisted living beds in Oregon already. We have 16 more coming in with Bergamot. That'll take us up to 80. That increases us right now to 9 beds per 1,000, which is well above the national standard. If we add another 106 beds, that takes us up to 7 times the national standard. I don't know how we're going to fill this. And as Laura Gotchberg just said, She's talking, what happens if this fails? We have experience in Oregon with a beautiful, beautiful, and I absolutely loved it, fitness center that was constructed, but it was way too big. And everybody who looked at it at the time says, this is way too big. And what happened to that? It created a huge amount of problem for a very, very long time. So what I'm just trying to do here is provide some relevance in terms of the size of this facility and the need in this community. And I'll stop there and turn over to anybody else who has comment.
I've got just a question.
Yeah.
To get the record straight. Thank you for coming. You're presenting yourself as an expert. I get the feeling you are. Are you representing an interest here tonight?
I am a neighbor. I live on North Main Street. My wife and I have lived in the school district of Oregon for, I believe, 31 years, and we have lived on North Main Street for the last 23 years, across the street but down. That this will be in our neighborhood, but I see it affecting more our neighbors than ourselves. So I don't have any financial conflict of interest. I do have a bias, though. And my bias is I feel this is way too big. And I worry about what the outcome, if this fails, is. And I also feel strongly that there's a high likelihood that this will not be a viable. And as soon as people move out and sell it to the next buyer, what's it going to become?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a question.
Oh, go ahead.
You had mentioned in your research that there's X number of beds per thousand, and you base a lot of your conversation on that 5 beds roughly per thousand. In my mind, it's kind of meaningless because the way that I would equate that is that it's twice as much as the national average. In my mind, that would mean that we have twice as many elderly or assisted living people in the state. My question to you would be something that I could understand is what is the percentage of occupancy in these facilities?
Across the state, it runs about 80 to 85%.
Okay.
So we have
while we are twice the national average in numbers, we're still maintaining an occupancy rate that's at least 80%.
Yes, and the other thing you find is cities like Stoughton that have a hospital will have a higher rate than cities that do not. Cities that have good public transportation will tend to have higher occupancy than cities and villages that do not. Because I think we heard, in stuff I reviewed here, that we're looking at an average age of 85. The people I put in the hospital last night were 90, 93, and 93. These are individuals, if the average age in this facility is 85, and there's 106 people aged, you're not going to be able to provide great care with 12 employees. I'm sorry, but I also do work with nursing homes, and we find that nursing homes are so highly stressed right now that the care, I hate to say this, but is atrocious most everywhere. What we know nationally from research is smaller facilities perform better than large facilities. Government-owned facilities have far higher standards than for-profit facilities. And I provided some references for the commissioners. If you're interested, I can provide more.
One last question. The numbers that you provide, do they take into account, I know that it'd be a relatively short snapshot, as society ages, obviously those numbers that you have quoted in here are going to start to creep up, obviously, because
but I doubt Oregon is going to be able to sustain, 7 times.
Understand.
Yeah, but the population is aging, but there's also a lot of migration southerly. So the long-term picture, I have not looked at that, so I can't really comment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Robin Roberts. I'm one of the owners, was with Marshall Menega of the property. We purchased the property 12 years ago when we built the new
Methodist Church, and from the get-go, we understood that the village would like high-density development of that site. Those were in our initial conversations and all of our conversations for the last 12 years. We've heard about the project that was approved previously, and we worked on this project with the developer to try and continue a project that was very similar to what was previously approved. I'd like to talk about the number of units a little bit based on the last speaker. Oakwood Village in Madison, I had lunch with one of the managers there this week, and they have over 1,000 beds. They're in Dane County. We built Badger Prairie Nursing Home that has 120 beds. Attic Angels has more than 100 beds. So there are several facilities in Dane County that are much larger than what the last data represented. We completed the planning and received this approval, and we've carried this project for about 12 years, this real estate. We have been approached by other developers for this site, market rate and subsidized apartments. We feel that this use creates less traffic, less noise, creates jobs in our community, and we think that this is a better use and a better solution for the village. I own an assisted living facility in Lodi, Wisconsin. Lodi's population is about 3,000. That's a 20-bed facility. We have two other facilities, Good Samaritan and Our House. So in Lodi, Wisconsin, we have way more than the average numbers that were just discussed. We see these facilities as bringing people back to an area. It's not the population of the area. We see gravitation of people to an area that have a facility that provides good care. So I'm here to answer any other questions that you might have, but just wanted to let you know that we've tried to be consistent with the plan that's been delivered to you over the last 6 or 7 years.
Okay, anybody any questions?
Well, just curious.
Sure.
What was the plan that was approved earlier in 2008?
2008, it was...
What was that plan?
That was an assisted living facility that had 96 units approved. It was larger in square footage than the proposed facility that we're talking about today. It was closer to the property lines. It was taller. So it was in all ways larger in scale than the current project. That project was previously approved for this site.
It was assisted living.
It was assisted living.
That's that packet here, Mark.
I just wasn't...
No, that's fine.
Okay, I just missed something there.
Some of us were around then doing that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Anybody else?
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak here before the Planning Commission. My name is Ray Vogler. I'm a neighbor. I live at 299 North Main Street in Oregon. I live at the corner, southwest corner of Johnson and Main. And I'm here as a neighbor, a person that's concerned about this facility being built in my backyard. So I want to talk about what this means for neighbors and you as neighbors, because Oregon is a small community. I would like you to kind of reach out to us, the neighbors, and think about how you would feel about this facility if it was in your backyard. So I want to give you a couple numbers and just talk about how this would kind of lay out in terms of on the ground floor. The numbers are that if the facility is built as proposed, it would equal approximately 22 plus another 30 homes. In other words, we in our neighborhood have 22 homes right now. And the block I'm talking about is North Main Street, Grove, Market, and then to Johnson. We live on the corner again of Johnson and Main. And taking the numbers for the facility, it would be much larger than that. We're talking about over 55 homes, in fact, as far as square footage, that would fit inside this facility. So regardless of what people say, the footprint is huge. We're taking the neighborhood we have right now, all 22 homes, and we're really subsuming them by another building that is going to be, number one, taller, 1 maybe 2 stories taller than all the buildings in our neighborhood. And on top of that, it's going to be double the square footage of all our houses combined. So think about that if you were looking out in your back door and you had this huge facility that not only would have to get a variance. I really appreciated what Mr. Trimble said. He talked about the numbers and the fact that they would take 15 or 12 feet off with the flat roof. And I think that's an improvement. I agree with that. But the problem is it's still 40 or 43 feet high. Right now, that goes against our rules, correct? Our rules are 35 or less. So for you to provide them with the opportunity to build, you need to give them still a variance. Number 2, they did not talk about lowering that to 3 stories or 2 stories. All the neighborhood homes where I live are about that, 2 stories, even smaller. So still, this building is out of scale with the neighborhood. On top of that, think about the fact that we have a lot of old homes in this neighborhood. Our home, for example, was built circa probably 1900. So it's 116 years old. And there's other homes in the neighborhood that are even older. How would a building this huge, this tall, and with a 6-foot fence fit into the neighborhood and really blend and look historic? I don't think it will. Those are some very huge concerns that we as neighbors have. But of course, there are other issues I want to bring up, and you may have heard them before, I don't know. But a couple of the other issues are the traffic pattern. Now again, I appreciate what Mr. Trimble said. He talked about going in on Main Street, right, and then the traffic comes through on Johnson. But I'll tell you, I live on Johnson. A number of people here live on Johnson. That's a very safe street. We have several bus stops. Kids run up and down, they ride their bikes, they play Frisbee. That has become like a playground, as have the green space for the neighborhood. All of a sudden you have people driving, you know, this is like a right of way. That's going to create some safety hazards that we need to think about. And that's very, very important because it's kind of a sanctuary, our neighborhood, to us, frankly. Right now, it's kind of off the beaten path. When you get past Main Street, kids use it to play, walk the dogs, and enjoy the green space. So I want to talk about congestion and traffic flow because our house, and I personally witnessed this, we live facing Main, our bedroom faces Main. When we moved to this neighborhood, and we've lived in Oregon about 21 years. We've lived at this house 13. When we moved here, we moved from a very small country subdivision. You could hear a pin drop. When we get here, you constantly hear the rumbling of traffic. I mean, there's semis, there's buses, there's EMT, there are cars going, you know, all the time. The only way to sleep right now, frankly, and I'm sure other neighbors will agree, is to keep a fan on all the time so that you don't hear that noise in the background. Now multiply that by 106 apartments. They'll either be studios or 1 bedroom, plus guests that come in, right, to visit, plus staff. That is going to create more traffic flow. There's no doubt about it, and I have not seen or heard of a traffic study. But the fact is that will have a huge impact on our neighborhood. Not only the fact that kids can get hurt, we're going to add pollution, frankly, fumes and dirt, and a lot of neighbors keep their doors closed so we don't get all that soot in the house. So I don't see this, frankly, as a benefit at all for the neighborhood. The runoff pond, that's a big issue to me right now. We have had flooding on Johnson Street, our house. In fact, as we were moving in, the first thing we did before signing on the dotted line, we ran in that basement because we knew there was flooding. And in fact, our house did flood, as did our neighbors down the way, also the neighbors on Market Street. So we have a known flood area. And to have a problem where there's 106 units, flushing toilets, you know, using showers, drinking water, your cafeteria, all of the water usage, we're very concerned, not just me, but other neighbors, that we're going to have more and more flooding. So that's one issue. And the other issue is this holding pond. I like the idea, but I also am concerned about mosquitoes. What about a mosquito nest? The fact that we have all these, like a haven for mosquitoes, and right now we're concerned about mosquitoes and viruses. And kids, dogs, you know, families being subjected to all of that. So those are a few of my concerns. But what I'd like to say is I really believe that you all want to do the right thing. You're our neighbors. And that you want to make sure that if this does go through, it goes through in a way where it blends. You know, it augments our neighborhood. It doesn't come in and, you know, destroy or ruin the character. But right now, it's just too big. And it doesn't sound viable from what I'm hearing. And I would suggest that number one, tonight you table this. Do not make a decision. You know, I heard you might be voting. There are too many factors. Number two, I would like to see you vote against this, frankly, and vote in a way that is with the neighborhood. Because many of us have homes, we love those homes, we care for those homes, we've been there for a long time. We do not want to be looking up against fences, floodlights, water problems, traffic, pollution, and noise. I mean, for us, it's not a win situation, frankly. And I think if it was your neighborhood, you wouldn't want it there either. So I would like to see a vote taken in open session, so when you do vote, people in the neighborhood know how you voted. That'd be important for us to know where you stand on this issue.
Excuse me, ma'am. All our votes are in open session.
Oh, good.
Always.
Excellent. Well, I'm really glad about
Thank
that.
you.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
Excellent.
I know it's good.
So I'm glad to hear that. So I'm urging that instead of doing that, why couldn't this land be used as some kind of a community center? I know a lot of good work is being done around the complex, you know, the civic campus. This area, by the way, is very close. It's right downtown. It's green space, beautiful land. Rather than giving $1 million in TIF to an outside developer, utilize that money to create a park here, one that can be used by the neighborhood and people on this side of Main Street, and also a community center that could blend in and add value to all the other buildings that we are working on right now. So I thank you for listening to me. And again, my name is Ray Vogler, and I live at 299 North Main Street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mike Wunsch, and I'm going to be brief because a lot's been said. I have a couple additional concerns. One is, given the property or the density of this property and the fact that 58% of the land is going to become impermeable, as Ray had mentioned, a lot of our homes flood. I mean, it doesn't flood, it doesn't come in my windows. It comes up through the bottom of the floor. It comes up through groundwater, okay? Whether you have a holding pond there or not, it isn't going to help the groundwater situation at all when 58% of this land doesn't soak up water. It's going to make the problem worse for us. The density of this building on this land is such that I would challenge any of you to figure out, if we have one of our great little snowfalls of 1.5 feet, where they intend to put that snow. Is that going to end up in the holding pond, and we're going to have a holding pond 20 feet tall? As far as property values, I'm not close enough to this that's probably going to affect my property values, but I know some of my neighbors that when they have a 3-story building on one side and a privacy fence 2 feet from their window with a generator and a with it.
We can hear you, trust me.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't need these.
Actually sounded like it did turn off, didn't it?
Yeah, with a generator and a transformer on the other side of the wall, it's not going to help his property value. He's going to have a 3-story building on one side and a 4-story building behind him. Is there any sort of compensation that's going to be offered to neighbors if they get their property assessed and they find that it goes down? Lastly, because I have a feeling most of the people here behind me that are from this neighborhood that oppose this aren't getting up to speak tonight. I'd ask my neighbors, would you stand up if you oppose this project? Because I think a good chunk of my neighborhood is here. So I believe the developer had said that they had met with the neighbors and the neighbors were sort of on board with this. At least that's what I've heard. We're not. This is too big for our neighborhood. This fundamentally changes what our neighborhood looks like. You wouldn't like it in your backyard, and we don't like it in ours. This isn't the sanctuary for us. Thank
Mr.
you.
Wunsch, I'm sorry, we need your address, sir. Mr. Wunsch, we need your address, please.
299 North Main Street.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jenny Nelson. I live at 127 West Grove Street, and then we also own 140 West Grove Street, across the street. So our backyard will overlook right now where the main entrance is, planned over there. And I build hospitals and things for a living, so I have an idea of what scale is and things like that. I actually took a picture of what my beautiful backyard looks now. And if this is pretty close to what the view in my backyard will look like, potentially it'll actually be about 10 feet higher, but this would be if the flat roof was there. So our concern obviously is our kids. And if you're going for traffic-wise, we live on Grove Street, and we notice when the church lets out, it becomes a racetrack down Market Street, over Grove Street into Main Street. And we have kids. We have 11 kids just on our block that play on the sidewalks, go across the streets, and on Sunday mornings it's not safe. So if they're going down Johnson Street to exit, people are going to go down Market, down Grove, and it's going to become a racetrack up our street. That concerns us. The other thing that really worries us, we lived through the 100-year flood. We lived at 140 Grove Street. I had 4 feet of water in my basement. The sewer system at that corner is connected to the creek behind Grove Street, right on the corner. So from what I understand, the pond is going to be pumped. If it starts to overflow into Market Street, that will go to the corner, which essentially will go into the creek and could cause more flooding than what we've already experienced. The 100-year flood does happen, I know, because it's now changed the 100-year flood, and I can't actually sell my other house without having flood insurance on it. So the pond itself and water runoff is a big deal to me. The other thing that concerns me, if they're only having 12 staff for 102 people, if the average age is 85, that's a lot of sick people, a lot of heart attacks, a lot of emergencies. If you are, my backyard will be where the front entrance is. That's where ambulances are going to be called to take people to St. Mary's, take people to Stoughton. There's not a hospital, there's not a medical facility in Oregon to help these people. So it's going to be a transport, which will then put pressure on our emergency services here. That if I have a heart attack, there's not going to be an ambulance to take me. So those are just a couple of my concerns. Everybody else has said a lot of the other ones. But thank you for listening.
Thank you.
I'm Stark Traxler. I live at 277 North Main Street. The property right to the north of this proposed site. And I agree with everybody else that has talked with my neighbors here. But one of the things that I think is interesting is Robin said that this proposed site that was supposed to be before was supposed to be assisted living. I'm sorry, he's wrong. That was a 55 and older condominiums. And then also the 277 or 249 and 267 have not lapsed into what is it that you guys called it? But anyways, it's TR6 according to your website. So anyways, we should probably try to keep that as TR6. And then the other thing that's kind of a double standard, the ordinance for downtown Oregon here is that no building, if a new building was to be built, can be taller than any of the existing buildings that are here. So why do we have to have a double standard with a building that is actually almost twice as tall as my house next door? And then also my other concerns are I know we got a 3-foot retaining wall. I know the the landscaper very personally, and I talked to him about this, and he knows with retaining walls, there's nothing but water issues. I've had no water issues in my basement for 25 years that I've lived here. And I've been in the construction business also, and I know what happens with pieces of property that are taller, especially with a retaining wall. And I know it's legal to be able to do so, but all that water is getting up in my basement. And I don't think there's any way that you guys are going to be able to stop that. And then, you know, my other question is what do we do about the smell ordinance with the dumpsters that are going to be right in my backyard? I mean, they're going to be right there at that turnaround at that hammerhead. And also, what about the noise ordinances that we have set in place? So those are my concerns, because I'm right next door. I probably am going to be affected probably the most out of the rest of my neighbors. I know Laura's going to be greatly affected also. So hopefully, you guys will, you know, like the other neighbors have said, is table this and move on to a better project here. You know, I've suggested to Jeannie last Wednesday night that, you know, maybe we should continue keeping this as TR6 and maybe build 5 or so brand-new homes with deed restrictions to have the character of our neighborhood on Main Street and one lot that would be on Lincoln Street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Kermit Traska, 116 West Lincoln Street, just a block north of this area. And daily, my dog and I visit the site in our morning walk, so very familiar with the site. My daughter moved to Chicago, and when she did, she moved into a 50s neighborhood, into a 50s bungalow. When she sent us a picture of it, we thought, what kind of a neighborhood is this? If you can picture a 50s story-and-a-half bungalow and essentially a 3-story apartment building next door, because the other bungalows, both on the south and north, had been torn down and huge buildings built. Essentially, that's what's going to happen here. It was her choice to move to Chicago and to buy that home. The people that live surrounding this area chose those homes because they wanted to live there and liked the setting of those. And granted, the church was nice and something nice could come there. And just a thought, in my travels, I got to Europe quite a bit. And one other thought about Oregon. I live in the historic district. I'm limited what I can do to my house. Many of the houses in this area surrounding the development are of the same era as my house, 100+ years. Is there a limitation what they can do, but shouldn't there also be a limitation that what can be put upon them in their backyards? And the thought goes with this, in the travels to Europe, in the historic districts, they had to maintain the facade, keep the front of the building, tear off the back, and build it to a current use. But the front had to stay the same. Is it possible that a building could be built that fits this neighborhood with a facade that looks like the neighborhood, not an institution? Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nick Malson-Huddle. I live at 248 North Main Street. I will live directly, or I do live directly across from the proposed site. I'll be brief. We recently purchased a house in January, and when we were looking for a house, we were looking for a small community, one that we can walk to downtown, one we were looking for a historic community, and we looked at other neighborhoods. We looked at Sun Prairie, we've looked at DeForest, we've looked at Stoughton. We chose Oregon. We chose Oregon because of the great historic buildings, because the lack of behemoths like that directly across the street from it. I would not have bought my house at 248 North Main had that been there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi there.
My name is Sarah Dewey. I live at 266 North Main Street. I'm directly across the street from the proposed site. And although I agree with virtually everything my neighbors have said and am not really happy with the idea of this particular development across the street, I'll also add that I don't see the value to Oregon as a community in the whole community. I don't see how the community as a whole will benefit from this particular development. Again, in addition to what my neighbors have said, directly impacting the neighborhood itself, I'm a nurse. I was the director of nursing at a large assisted living facility on the west side of Madison. And state regulations for assisted living, in my opinion, are fairly lax. You do not have to have a nurse on staff 24/7. You can have a consulting nurse, which means that the staff who are caring for the elderly folks, they're not required to be CNAs. They can be virtually pulled off the street, given some training, and left on their own to take care of these folks. First line of defense, when there's a fall, someone's sick, there's an accident, anything happens, they have to call 911. If there's a nurse, a registered nurse on staff, they're there to do assessments, and maybe 911 doesn't need to be called. But the majority of assisted living facilities do not have 24/7 nursing staff. The facility I was the director at, again, was on the west side. It was on a bus line because the folks, and in the presentation earlier, the packet with information about assisted living, you can see that caregivers, because they're not required to have certification, education, even skills and formal training, they're on the lower end of the pay scale, so they themselves are lower income folks. The facility I was at, again, was on a bus line on the west side of Madison, easy access, easy to get to. These lower income people that are going to be your staff pool don't have cars, they don't have reliable cars, and they don't have a way to get to Oregon. And I don't believe that Oregon has the population and to pull from to staff this facility. So I would ask, is it realistic that you're going to be able to get people to staff this facility from the Madison area or other communities? How are they going to get here? Are they going to be reliable? And again, as the director of nursing at a large facility on the west side that had public transportation access, it was a constant battle and fight to recruit employees, find employees, keep employees, and for employees to show up. So the staffing issues in and of itself are huge and can impact not only potential residents in this facility, but the community as a whole, increased calls for services, just, it goes on and on. A facility this size, and there's a debate going on, you can look at numbers, you can look at statistics. A facility this size, the facility that I was the director of nursing at had approximately 70-ish beds, but then we also had a memory care unit. And this is another problem that I see with this design as it's proposed. People that are placing family members in an assisted living facility are looking for a continuum of care. People that go into assisted living are going to progress into a state with dementia and eventually have to go into a memory care unit. So folks want a continuum of care from an assisted living to dementia memory care units. And when you don't have that, that's going to mean that you have to uproot this person that is now familiar with their surroundings and, or has been, and they're having memory issues. You're uprooting them and trying to find another place to take them and move them. And that's not good for the resident. It's not good for the family. I can go on and on. I've just given you a few bits and pieces. I would recommend that, or I would hope that the commission tables this, gathers more information. You can go to the State of Wisconsin website and look up regulations for assisted living and requirements for assisted living. Because once you start looking at that and look at the size and the demands and the requirements as far as staffing and care, it just does not make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And just one other comment regarding Oakwood. I would ask that somebody check that out. I don't believe it's 1,000-bed assisted living. They have independent apartments for folks. They have assisted living, and they have a nursing home facility. So I think when you combine those, you may get close to that number, but I don't believe that there's 1,000-bed assisted living facility there. I'll conclude with listening to the information that has been available, trying to find some information on the village website regarding previous discussions. My understanding is that with either changes to the existing plan or approval of the exemptions or variances, that this may be legally okay and meet the requirements legally, although I don't think that makes it an appropriate or a right decision and thing to do for the community as a whole in Oregon. And again, I would really ask you to seriously either reconsider or flat out don't consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Sarah Coffey. I live at 128 West Grove Street, across the street from Jenny Nelson, and next to her other house. And I moved here in Oregon in 2006, and a couple of years later, my house flooded. And it was due to a bad culvert. I forgive you. And I had 4 feet of water in my backyard. Well, what are you gonna do? You gotta move on. But I hope we learn from that. We fixed something, but we're now adding to it. And she talked about the flooding, but when the creek backs up, it backs up the storm sewer, and that backs up my storm drain, my drain in my basement. The water comes up, and I had water in my basement, a lot of water in my basement. And I don't want it to happen again. I'm concerned that the retaining pond that they propose is not big enough. I'm concerned that if it is a 5-foot holding pond, it's gonna be a algae stink area, and it's not nice in our neighborhood. We are a community, and it is a densely populated building, but these are all single-family homes. This is a community. These are pride of ownership. We own our buildings, most of it. You know, bank owns part of it. But my point is that the pride of ownership is there, and the sense of community is there. And our kids are in the neighborhoods all around the backside of Main Street, because Main Street is scary for parents to have children running on Main Street. That is why Market Street is utilized. People walk their dogs, people ride their bikes, people teach their kids to ride their bikes. And that is part of our community that we like, is why we moved here. We are not in a densely populated area that can sustain, or it fits the size of that building. And I question the sound issue with all the window units. They're loud. And if they're not paying the electricity, they're on. And that's a lot of units on. And contractors may not think it's a big deal, But where are those buildings that they're talking about? Where are they located? Are they located right between, among outside houses? No, they're in an area appropriate for that building. And having Bergamot only have us, that area has land, and they're only doing 60 bed facility or 60 unit facility. Why is the 100 in this tiny little footprint with flood issues in Bergamot, which has the capacity to build a decent retaining pond, have the smaller portion, the smaller units? It doesn't make sense. And I just wanted to be in support of my neighbors, because we are all community, we all know each other. And I'm concerned about one other thing, and I'll be done. Along Market Street, the people along Market Street have that commercial area all along there, and they're stuck with railroad track and warehouse. So that's what they got on one side that they look at. Their backyard is their privacy. Their backyard is their sanctuary. And now we're gonna have a 4-foot structure in your face, in your backyard. That will bring down property values. I don't see it bringing it up. And I feel bad for them, that if that goes in, that they have that in their backyard. They lose that sense of space, which is what our community is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'd like it to be new stuff, yes. Okay, it's your second turn, but let's keep it brief, please. I'm sorry. I thought you were up here before.
My name is Susan Shedovy. I used to live on Main Street, and now I maintain that property as a rental unit. It's a duplex, and it's across the street from the church.
I'm sure we need the address.
At 220 North Main Street.
Thank you.
I'm going to keep this very short because we've had a lot of experts from the neighborhood speaking to these issues. And I just want to mention that I was reading in this little packet here about how the proposed assisted living facility is a land use that is in harmony with the goals, objectives, policies, and standards of the Village of Oregon. A little later it says, in its proposed location and configuration, it does not result in a substantial or undue adverse impact on nearby properties, the character of the neighborhood, environmental factors, traffic factors, parking, public improvements, public property rights, or other matters affecting public health, safety, or general welfare. And then it goes on. Well, anyway, my whole point is just because you say this does not make it true. And what has been said here by these community members, I believe that what they are saying is true. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're not going to stop from speaking.
I would just like maybe somebody to answer this for me tonight, and I think the whole community would like this. Again, my name is Laura Gotchberg. I'm at 233 North Main Street. I started looking at the website of LaSalle and Tapestry to see where they have placed other projects they've done. And I see them in Minneapolis, I see them in Indianapolis. My question is when I start looking at these and I see an affiliate, which goes under the name of Crown Senior Living, I want to know how they're related. Because when I look at the Tapestry website and the Crown website, the same properties are on both. And I just would be curious to know how these are affiliated. And when I look at the Crown website, some of these places have sold within a year or upon completion. And I do have a list of at least 6 properties that I have looked at. And I don't know if anyone else has looked at this or if it could be explained in a reasonable manner to me to alleviate my concerns that this could be a turnkey project and it may be sold upon completion or upon 18 months to 2 years out is what I've been finding, and it may be false information, but I would like someone to address that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Tim?
Again, I'm Tim Trimble with the LaSalle SCA Properties Group. First of all, to answer the question of who, we have a partnership between several groups. LaSalle Group, of which I work with, the principal there has been involved in senior housing for 40 years. The principals of SCA Properties, the partner and the primary developer, have been involved in housing for 40-some years. Tapestry is our management company. It's also a development company that works on other senior projects. That has partners, one of which is the gentleman from Crown. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for or how, but it's basically businessmen who've been doing senior projects for a number of years that get together to work on one, but not necessarily every project all the time. I do think a couple things need to be clarified that hopefully address some of the questions or concerns. There's a lot of conversation about average number of units and average number of nursing homes. We have to keep in mind we're targeting the affordable senior market. That's the market most people overlook because it's hard to make the numbers work to provide the services at the rents that folks can afford to pay, or they can look for government programs to help supplement payment on their services. So if you take that into effect, a lot of the conversation that took place and the statistics that were put out were a blend of private pay, high-end, medium, all sorts of combinations. We're not in that. We're targeting the low, moderate income. So we've done some market research, or quite honestly, we wouldn't have spent the time, energy, and dollars to be where we are and asking for what we're asking for. The simple fact is to provide the services at a level that you can make economic sense from an operation as well as costs due to the construction and all the other things, you have to be at 106 units for this site to make that work. Some folks have talked about 12 employees. I'm not sure where that number came from. We are not targeting heavily senior care. We're not a nursing home. I'll say it again, we are not a nursing home. Nursing homes, as the one woman said, you're required to have higher levels of RN staffing across the board. We're targeting seniors, again, who can't afford to live in a private pay model and who need some services, but we're not at the heavy end of the care spectrum. So we've got a very definitive piece that we're looking for. We're also not expecting that we're going to draw just primarily from the Oregon area and no further than that. Given the fact that we're going for the slice of the market, if you will, we expect that we'll draw geographically from a larger area. So therefore, again, our market research says there are plenty of seniors who could use this product. There aren't that many, there's not that much product out there for those folks to go to. So there's a bigger distinction there, I think. You know, somebody also asked the question about, well, what if this fails? We're financing the project with bonds, and there'll be tax credit issues. I think I described this last time. Those tax credit buyers are institutions that have extremely stringent criteria of the developer. We're not only going to have to fund the project to get it to a closing, and we also have to make guarantees on the project. So they want to know that it's going to work. If it doesn't, we have to write the check. It's a 15-year commitment by the tax credit buyer, so this project won't be sold to anybody in 15 years. If it doesn't perform the way it's supposed to be, we have to pay the difference to the credit investor for that 15-year duration. So the project isn't going to be sold in a year or two. Typically, at the end of the 15 years, at that time, you may refinance the project. A lot of times they'll go issue new credits, do some renovation improvements, and put it back in cycle for another 15-year period. I believe the WIDA group, which is the Wisconsin Housing Economic Development Agency that we're working with on the financing, they typically require a commitment of 30 years. So we have to say that we'll keep it in the program for 30, not 15, even though that's the tax credit. So it is a long-term commitment on our end. And I go back to, that's why for us, we want to blend into the neighborhood and be a part of the fabric of Oregon. Understand, and you know, a lot of times change of any type is always difficult because everybody likes it kind of the way it is. People talked about you could have used the site for community centers and those kind of things. Truth is, it sat there for 12 years as a vacant building and nobody else has stepped forward to make it happen, short of one other developer that was looking at doing something very similar to what we're doing. There's been a lot of conversation too about water problems. I'm not sure how somebody taking a shower in my building is going to affect flooding in somebody's basement. I do know that our civil engineer, and again, I can have him come back up here, Dean, we have underground piping system around the building that will take the rain and run off from the impervious surface into the pond. We've actually lowered to the roadway, as he mentioned, to improve the situation that's there now. And it will, once it gets over the outlet, flow into the system. And where it goes from there, you know, that I can't control that piece. So we're doing everything we can on ours to improve the condition that's there for the neighbors, as well as accommodate what we're creating by our building. And I think we've done a really good job of it. Somebody mentioned the trash out there. Typically, we keep it inside until the day it's picked up. We'll wheel it out, they'll pick it up, we'll bring it back in, so it doesn't sit outside for 7 days on end. Let's see. I think that kind of concludes the one I found interesting is, on one hand, folks were saying we only employ 12 people. On the other hand, you're telling me I can't find 12 employees in all of Oregon. We do, in my experience, I've been in the management business for 30-some years. Employees come to work in all different types. Some of them ride the bus, some of them take the train, some of them get dropped off, some of them the parents do, some of them the spouse do, some drive cars. Again, we have now 50 stalls of parking. So our staffing at the prime time will be probably 20, I think. So we've got plenty of parking for visitors. They come in different times, so it's not a mad rush, as other folks have said. So I think that covers everything. I just want to clarify those points. If anybody had a question or not.
Anybody? All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any additional public input?
Hi.
Hi there.
My name's Dawn Adamany. I live at 667 North Oak Street. I'm a couple blocks away from this, but I do have parents, other elderly relatives that have been in, that are in assisted living. First of all, I was wondering if, I don't know, the other facilities that they manage, if they have a resident satisfaction surveys that they've done, knowing how these people feel about how where they're living is being managed, and, you know, what it's like. Because I know the people I know, they have those sort of things on a regular basis. Menus are changed according to that. You know, just the way things happen and go there. I don't know if that is taken into consideration with their facility. Also, I didn't know, were these units going to be rented, or are they supposed to be bought? Because most assisted living, you buy your unit. So this is, because this is low income, they're going to rent this. Did they say what the cost is going to be?
Not that I know of.
Because I'm sure these people are either on disability, or they're going to be, you know, I mean, their retirement income, or they haven't really proposed that. I guess that would be something that should be looked at. The other thing is, they're saying they're looking at residents that are 85 plus. Baby boomers are what, in their 60s now? I was born in 57, I'm 58, I'm gonna be 59 this year. So you're looking at 20 years from now, all of us in this, the baby boomers, it's 20 years before they expect baby boomers to move into this. It seems like maybe this is premature to have this kind of facility here, because baby boomers aren't quite there yet. Most people are still in their homes, or maybe a 55 plus environment where you're still interacting a lot with the other residents there. You're more mobile, you just don't want the yard work, you don't want, you know, that kind of thing. Some people don't even want to cook. I mean, there's a lot of single people that just don't even want to bother to cook for themselves. But I don't know, and I also said that I mean, they're saying that their residents are 85 plus, therefore they probably won't have a car. I don't know, I don't know. I think maybe this land can be used, like they said, for community center or something. It seems like we're crunched for land and all the things that the village wants to do. It's just gotta be a better use for the village in this area, which is either that or put in, let someone else buy the land for a home that could look more of the historic nature of the homes, a nice, you know, house that looks like either like the, I forget what it's, craftsman style home, or, you know, a two-bedroom home, that, a Victorian style home or something that keeps with the nature of this, because it is basically our historic district. But that's my concerns. I don't know if I.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Okay, at this time, we'll close the public hearing. Move on to discussion. Okay. Initial comments from anyone? What we are really essentially talking about tonight, if you were to proceed, is essentially discussing or setting up zoning.
Correct.
Correct? So, the fact that this facility or this type of facility is being presented is that that's what they're intending, or they wanted to put on that facility or on that property. And as such, it requires a different zoning than what's there right now. So we understand what we're not voting on or discussing or entering into any kind of agreement on the actual facility itself. We're simply dealing with zoning at this time. Fully understanding, that's what they're gonna come back with, if in fact the zoning is granted, or not granted, but passed on to village board. Comments from anybody?
It seems to me like the zoning is, for that property is eventually going to need to be planned development in order to get anything built there, and that course of action is probably the way we need to head. Whether this facility is right for it, I'm not totally seeing that it is, particularly with the objections by the community and a lot of the things that have been brought out. I guess I am okay with changing the zoning, but I'm wondering if we don't have some compromises that can be made on both parts. The part of the developer and the part of the what's acceptable to the neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you.
I wanna stress something. If the GDP is granted, we have approved a 4-story building.
Yes.
We've approved a building or a project that covers more than half of the site with impervious surface. We've approved a project that has a driveway on North Main Street and one on Johnson. We can't approve this GDP and then negotiate. That's not the.
You can negotiate finishes and those types of things.
Yes, but
not the
in terms
actual-
of what
right.
the project is and its scale, if you don't like it, now's the time to deny or recommend denial of the request. If you think it's close.
Does that include number of units as well?
Ballpark, yes. If you want a 2-story 40-unit building, don't approve this GDP.
I guess I'd go ahead and say that I don't, this particular GDP, it doesn't seem to fit and scale with the neighborhood. And I think we've heard a lot of people say that tonight. I agree with Larry. I think eventually we will have to change the zoning and do a general or a planned development, but I don't think this is the right one. So I'd go on record saying that I'm not in favor of this plan.
I concur.
Okay.
I was surprised when I saw the previous approval tonight that we had approved that one as large as we did. But thinking back also to that period in time before the Great Recession and whatnot, we approved a couple other rather dense projects in town, which had financial problems and meltdowns as well. So I don't know that because we approved something of that size at that time that it necessarily means that it's any more appropriate today to go to that size and density. And we certainly need to look at what's happened in the past when we've experimented with density that you see in larger urban areas than our suburban community.
Right, that previously approved project has expired, and the zoning, the plan development zoning that we approved for that project is gone.
Right.
It's off the books, as though it didn't happen. There's no precedent created for this property by that expired project.
Okay, good. That was a question I had.
There isn't, but the concern we have is that we did in fact, understand there's no precedent set. However, we did go through great extensive discussion on this, public hearings, et cetera, at that time. And I don't know if we have new residents in the area. Obviously, there's a much different outpouring at this time than we had at that time. The facility that was presented at that time and did go through and get it passed is very similar in its size, scope, to what's being presented tonight. My only point is that if in fact you're looking at something else, then we're presenting this area to potential developers in the wrong way. And it's not appropriate to do that to those people. I don't know what can be done you can't soften it. And when we keep on talking about 4-story, it's not a 4-story building, it is a 3-story building. It is 4 stories on the north side, as the other facility was. So it is a 3-story facility. So that's a matter of record. John, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I guess personally, I don't have a problem with the project except for the fact of the density. I think that the numbers are a little too high. And I think that by changing the number of units, it will reduce some of the height, or at least create some more visual interest in the project, which I think is causing some angst as well. I think that if the number of units were to be reduced slightly, 10%, that you could make some of these other things less impactful. But I think that the project generally, they're trying to do the right thing. I'm not too concerned about the trash. I'm not concerned about the noise. I'm not concerned of the lighting. I think is fine. I would like to take a look at some of the screenings and those types of things, but I mean, they're just kind of fundamental byproduct of what we have to do. So I think it's close, but I don't think it's quite there yet. I wouldn't be willing to kill the project, but I would be asking them to take another look at the long-term numbers.
Okay, so I'm sensing here that we've got obviously concerns, and would it be more appropriate or everybody more comfortable if we were to simply table it as opposed to denying it?
What would that accomplish?
Yeah, you're not under pressure to hustle this along in terms of the law, Wisconsin law. You can keep it here. The village board can choose to pluck it from you after 90 days if you haven't acted. That's not happened in the 15 years that I've been working here, 16 years. And typically the board has relied on the Plan Commission for a recommendation. I would say that in listening to John's concerns about units and how they relate to the scale of the building, I would say that in my opinion, the 10%, if you shouldn't approve it, but that would be close enough, at least to the objective you stated, John, that you could hold it here and see if the project gets modified. If you had said half of it needs to go, I wouldn't recommend tabling it and keeping it here.
I like your idea, John, not killing the project, giving it an opportunity at least for them to evaluate. You know, we have a property that's distressed, quite frankly, and something has to be done with it.
And there's a certain comfort level that's come about that. I've heard people talk about how they take their dogs to walk in the area, and, you know, it's become kind of park-like in a certain sense. But with that being said, we also need to look at it as a viable piece of property that should have some development potential to it.
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to make an observation. I was very impressed with the public commentary. I didn't hear any prejudicial statements about this being geared for low-income residents. You know, in other communities at other times, I've heard those kind of statements. The great majority of the concerns we heard, I thought, were about character and the fact that this has historically been a very solid neighborhood that people have made long-term investments in, and people are concerned about the effect of this project on both the historic character and I think on whether the neighborhood remains, you know, solid as investments for owner-occupants in particular. And I think those are very legitimate concerns. And so, again, sometimes I warn you to disregard a statement that might be seen as prejudicial. For some reason, we didn't hear, I don't think, anything that can approach that concern. And thank you for your testimony in that regard.
And I think what I'm hearing from both of you is that if we can leave the door open and have some further discussion and achieve that by tabling this tonight, so that the project could be scaled differently, or you know, a lot of concern, I think, is the way things look, and trying to be more like the historic district that it is. So the facade, perhaps, as Kermit pointed out, you know, maybe that could be changed a little bit. But if we leave the door open to further discussion rather than just slam the door.
Well, in fairness to the applicant, I think that'd be appropriate. At least give them an opportunity to evaluate it one more time.
I would say, personally, it didn't sound like 10% was going to satisfy the neighborhood. And your job is not necessarily to make everybody
That's
happy,
right.
but I don't know that I heard that all of you agree that 10% is plus or minus is going to change your mind about the project.
And so I would ask that if the commission does table it, we need to get some really clear direction from the commission, what you want to do with the project, in fairness to the residents and to the developer.
Well, okay.
And then, Rick, can I just say something?
Sure,
I want to second what you said that, and I think if the project gets turned down, I think in fairness to the owners of the property, if we're changing our opinion about what we want on the property, the planning commission and the board should talk about that in the future. I thought that was a great point you made, so.
Well, in fairness, these people also have owned that property for
Right.
12 years, and previously they've been told that they could have something like this.
Yep.
So now you're gonna come back and try to say that we'll give you 10 cents on the dollar. Would be inappropriate, I think, also from the standpoint of municipality. That would be the wrong visual to give to other developers when it comes to this village. In your comment, though, regarding a time period, whatever, 1 month may be too little, 2 months, but in my mind, is sufficient? On how you guys feel? It's gotta have an end point somewhere. We'd make a decision at the end.
One option open is you could instruct the applicant, if they want to come back at a conceptual level, which is a lot less expensive to prepare, and test your reaction to that if it's, significantly different. They have that option, and that might be.
What I'm trying to get at, save everybody time, but if 10%'s not gonna do it, what does the commission wanna see? And then what's viable for the, you know what I mean? So,
Well,
I'm always worried when we table things, but what is that?
I understand.
What does that mean?
But, my feeling, my belief for asking for that to be tabled was simply to give the applicant the opportunity
think on-
to
okay.
reevaluate.
That's fine.
They can withdraw, they can do whatever.
That's fine.
But to just cut it off right now, I think is
That's
wrong. I understand everybody would like to have this as a park. That's not feasible. It simply isn't. Unless somebody in that area, but they want to buy the property, fine, then they can make it a park if they like. But it's just, that's not what the village is set up to do right now. That's not our planning. That's not what we foresee. So if it's okay, if we put some kind of a time frame on this, time limit on this thing, if that's acceptable to you guys, or if you want to enter into a vote, then so be it. But I think in a fairness to the applicant, I think it's appropriate that we give them at least a 2-month time period in which they decide whether they want to proceed any further or they don't.
I think if we're gonna table it, we're essentially saying it's not gonna pass as is, in a way. We're not, it's not saying that, but it's kind of going down that path. So I think we should offer some suggestions on what criteria is not.
We gotta be a little careful with that. We don't want to give developers we don't want to do that, Eric. Okay? And the reason we don't want to do that, because then it puts the onus back on us that we have to, all of a sudden, we're helping a developer develop the project, and that's inappropriate. They come into us.
So we can say what's objectionable about the current proposal.
Obviously, we have.
It doesn't, the height is against current.
Again, the height, the one thing I feel, I shouldn't say I feel bad about that, I'm not embarrassed either, but I'm somewhat concerned that we approve something and 12 years later we say you can't do it now. And all along, this has probably been presented, maybe possibly other people, maybe not.
They've looked at it, yeah.
It's misleading. So we misled some.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think that was 8 years ago, 2008.
I'm sorry, it was 2008.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, you're right.
2008.
I'm sorry, you're right.
People change on commissions, people change on village boards. I wasn't on either of the boards in 2008. I don't think I would have voted for it in 2008. I think it's okay to change your mind. I think it's okay to reevaluate. I have no problem saying yes 8 years ago and saying no now. That's just what strategical thinkers do.
I'm not saying it's not okay to say no. I'm just thinking at this point, we've had a public hearing and all said no. I think it's inappropriate. I believe it's fair to give them one more opportunity. Withdraw, whatever. Maybe they want to do something different.
Okay. Yeah, I think the developer has heard from the neighborhood.
Yep.
I've got a record saying I think it's out of scale of the neighborhood. I think Eric has some concerns about the height. So they know some of our concerns at least.
It's also not in our place to comment on the business viability of the project.
No, that'd be inappropriate. So, we're gonna bring this to a closure, so are we prepared to, at least this point, table it for 2 months? And then we'll come back, and if nothing happens, then we'll have a vote in the August meeting, correct?
Yes.
I'd make a motion to that effect.
Can we add to the motion that we're tabling it to give the developer a chance to address
Yes,
concerns?
yes,
Okay,
that's
then
acceptable.
I would second that motion.
Okay. Motion and a second, any discussion?
So Greg, can I ask a question? Because, so
Absolutely.
everyone showed up for the meeting, so, are we saying that we're asking the developer to come back at the August meeting or no later at the August meeting?
No later.
Okay, so they could come back, okay. So you have to watch the village's webpage if they're
Yeah.
gonna be on the July.
Since there's no public hearing,
Right,
the adjacent residents will not be notified
Right.
officially. So please pay attention to the agendas will be published 1 week in advance.
right. Yeah, early part of July.
Early part of July, so you will not be alerted by the village or the Oregon Observer, and well as contacting staff as to whether or not there will in fact be an additional conversation with the developer by that time. But watch for the July meeting also.
If you have somebody that has everyone's email address, we can be happy to send it out if you want.
There will not be another public hearing at this point. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Public comment period, I know the school board has like a 15-minute public comment period, it's not really a hearing.
Until I know what's gonna happen, I don't know if we'll,
Chair's prerogative.
it's the chair's prerogative, wonderful.
It is.
It would be helpful for people in the community to feel like we're included in the process.
Yeah, okay. Yes, go ahead, Tim.
I would welcome if you want to table it, and you said up to 60 days.
Yes.
Be more than happy to sit down and meet with the neighbors, we've done it twice before, and talk about, if there's changes we can make. What I'm wrestling with is I hear about height, so we figured out a way to make it 3-story everywhere. Does that get to where we need to go? 'Cause there's some things that I'm thinking about as we're sitting here that, we have 1-bedroom units, we can make studios and do some things like that, to take the size down if need be. So I'd like to explore that with folks in the neighborhood and see if there's a way to take those and come up with something that, meets in the middle, if you will, and maybe we can get to where we're all.
And I would hope that the residents be open to that. Since you're open to it, I would hope they would be.
Maybe we can figure out a time to get back together in a week or so.
All right. Thank you for that. Any other discussion?
Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. It's tabled. Thank you. Thank you for your input.
Can I just clarify the motion that it is to table this for 2 months by, and the developer has to appear before August 2016. And they can
I mean, he can send me an email and an image about the application.
How about like a 3-minute recess? 5-minute recess? Okay, we will recess for 5 minutes.
But he couldn't. That's what I'm saying. I've gone through this. When people want to table, it's a